Good evening, all. Whoever is already here, let me see. Nobody's here, so the usual Thursday evening. I'm gonna then drink my tea and talk about optics. Maybe somebody will wander in. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so long in fact that I don't remember when the last one was. I think it was about 5-6 weeks or thereabouts. Okay, I do see a few people here. The champ is back. Robbie, thank you. I'm assuming you meant me. Maybe you meant you. I really don't know. But assuming you meant me, thank you for your kind words. If you guys can hear me, put something in the chat box just to be sure. All my indicators suggest that the camera is working and the microphone is working, but I've learned the hard way that doesn't mean shit. So please confirm you can hear me, and we'll get rolling. Definitely me. Well, thank you, Robbie. And that probably implies that you can indeed hear me. So let's see. What's a good way of going about this? All right. I may end up holding a scope in my hands. In the past, I've seen a lot of complaints that the background behind me is dark and you can't see anything. So I changed venue until it gets too hot. This is sort of my garage/workshop. What's behind me is technically my safe, and I bought this lighter color background that I can use, and I have my trusty whiteboard with me. And what's behind me in the safe, probably too dark for you guys to see, but that's the kind of stuff I can't touch while doing a YouTube live stream. But I started doing my locals live streams in front of the safe so that I can actually take guns out and show what's what, etc. The topic of the conversation today, and all right, I look forward to your videos. Can hear well. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Really do appreciate it. So the topic of the conversation today, like many different things, that I talk about, is inspired by something I saw on the forums. In this case, it was a sniper's hide, where I spent a reasonable amount of time, not as much as I used to, but still a reasonable amount of time. And there was a thread there. Why aren't there more rifle scopes with objective lenses larger than 56 millimeters? We can talk about that if you want, but that's not what I wanted to touch on. And one of the guys there said, oh, I saw an article in Guns and Ammo about 10-15 years ago that talked about resolution limits. And that guy used the information from the article to calculate that with a 56 millimeter objective, 29 power is the largest magnification that you can use. Beyond that, you're just making things bigger, you're not making things sharper. And in other words, as far as he's concerned, going higher than 29 power or with a 56 millimeter objective is basically useless, waste of money, effort, yada yada. At least that's how I interpreted what he wrote. I challenged him in a little bit because that is factually incorrect, and which is one of the things I'm going to try to explain today. I don't think he believed me. But then somebody else there found an article, not from Guns and Ammo. This one was, I think, from American Rifleman, from the NRA magazine, that basically talked about presumably the same thing. I haven't seen the original Guns and Ammo article. I've seen the American Rifleman article. When I first set up this live stream, to talk about that, my plan was basically to run roughshod about my fellow gun writers and basically rip them to shreds, because the way they're arguing, the way they're presenting this information it's a nice way of saying this. Let's go with illiterate, okay? And simply because they looked it up online or hit a basic optics textbook and they found the one thing in there that is easily susceptible to explanation with basic arithmetic, and they just rolled with it. The basic problem with this approach is that if you understand the calculation, but you don't understand what it means, you will come up with a technically accurate result and a completely erroneous conclusion, which is the exact situation we have here. I remember when I was in business school, somewhere in my checkered past, my original background is applied physics, but I do have an MBA. And quite a few of my friends have MBAs as well. One of my friends got his MBA from USC. And I remember we were chatting, and he goes, they had some sort of team project, and one of the guys on the team had a doctorate in statistics. And he ran all the models, created all the analysis, all calculations, whatever, business situation they were trying to solve for their final master's thesis. And my friend who was on the team goes, damn, the guy can build any model you want, but he does not understand what any of them mean. And that is a very, very important distinction. And the situation we have here is fairly similar. So me being mean to people who take this information and misuse it is probably being a little bit unfair. So I'm going to try to avoid being mean, but I'm sure it will come through. The reason it is unfair is that if this kind of understanding was simple, honestly, there wouldn't be a need for people like me, right? What I do for a living, what I've done through the bulk of my technical career was not design. It was test, characterization, measurement, systems, that kind of stuff. The reason for the existence of systems engineers like me, fundamentally, is to be able to understand what all the details really mean. Not always how to figure out the details, but often how to figure out what they really mean, what the real application is. Okay. All right. After this long preamble, I'm going to get to the problem at hand. But what we have here is essentially somebody takes factually correct information, doesn't know what it means, tries to apply it to rifle scopes, and makes the mistakes of understanding and interpretation not so much of math. Although with math, there's also a mistake, and small mistake by factor of 2. For fuck's sake. Okay. How many of you have heard of Rayleigh limit or Dawes limit, basically resolution limit or diffraction limited optics? Does that mean anything to you? Ever heard of diffraction limited? Diffraction limit, anything like that? Let's see if there's anything in the chat box. All right, I'm going to sip my tea and give you guys a chance to answer. Yay or nay would be good. Just want to have an idea of which way to take this. Okay. All right, since Paul, no, haven't heard of that. Lost dog account means nothing to me. Okay, all right. So light is kind of an interesting thing. It behaves both as a wave, as a particle. What, Jason, heard it referenced, but don't have a good understanding. Perfect. Okay. So what that means is that depending on which phenomena you are working with, light will behave both as a wave and as a particle. Interestingly, Einstein, best known for theory of relativity and all that, actually got his Nobel Prize for a paper on the photoelectric effect, which proved that light is a corpuscular basically particle-based nature of light. But in this case, what we're talking about is an effect of the wave-like nature of light and how light goes through a medium, through air, water, whatever, and how it is affected by edges is basically due to its wave-like nature. And what that basically means, I don't know if you guys have ever seen something called the slit experiment. If you have a narrow slit, you push light through it, you will see there is a primary beam going through. Then there is a dark area, then there's a bright, dark, bright, dark, bright. And this is what's called diffracted pattern, right? Light gets diffracted. As you open up the slit, these diffracted waves become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So what that essentially means is that if you're trying to build an optical system that creates an image, The larger the objective lens diameter, the higher performing it can be. Mind you, I said it can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. Okay. Good. Let me check something real quick. I'm just making sure everything is running the way it should. Okay. It is. Last time I did this, my power supply for the camera crapped out. Okay, now it's running. I just didn't see the power indicator. My apologies for the interruption. Okay. So if you have a perfectly designed lens, a larger diameter lens is able to resolve, looking out into the world, a smaller angle. When we talk about resolution, we usually talk about angles, right? If you want to translate a particular angle to some physical size of an object far away, you know how far away it is by using basic trigonometry. Trigonometry, you can figure out the size of an object. But I'm going to talk about angles. Okay. So if you have a lens that's larger, so as an example, here is a March 1 to 10. The objective lens diameter is 24 millimeters. Here is Vortex 6 to 36 by 56. The objective lens diameter is 56 millimeters. If both of these are perfectly designed optics, and they aren't, although they're very, very nice. If both of these are perfectly designed optics, that means in terms of how small of a detail you can see very, very far away, a Vortex is capable of high resolution simply because it has a large objective. However, if we were, for example, dealing with a 24 millimeter objective March and a 56 millimeter Shanghai special for $8 off of Amazon, I guarantee that the March would outperform it despite having a much smaller objective. So how the device is built still matters to a significant degree. Okay. Assuming we're dealing with perfect optics for now, if you know the diameter of the objective, you can calculate quite easily. In this case, more estimate. The actual calculation is a little bit more involved, but we have very good estimates. You can estimate what angular accuracy it is capable of. There are a few different ways of estimating it. Most of the easily understandable one came out of the early astronomy experiments. People were messing with telescopes a couple hundred years ago, and Lord Rayleigh at some point calculated the size of these diffractive disks, diffractive rings that come from a circular objective, and related it to the wavelength of lights coming in. Wavelength in this case means color for visible light, and the diameter of the objective. And the Rayleigh criterion basically looked something like this. Let's see if I actually have markers that work this time. There's a new, I've never used them, so we'll see. This is not supposed to be an academic lecture. I'm just going to throw a couple of formulas at you, and then I'll talk. It basically means that if you have a circular objective imaging stuff, you're going to have this diffractive pattern where you have this center spot that's very bright. Then it's going to be a shell ring. It's going to be rings like this, and a weaker one further out, and all that. So basically, the diameter of this thing for Rayleigh criterion was 2.44 times the wavelength of light, that's a Greek letter lambda, divided by the diameter of the objective, right? So if we are dealing with, let's say, green light, right, around 550 nanometers, let's say it's use 565, because that's relevant to what I'll get to next. If this is 565 nanometers, and this is 56 millimeters, okay, you can have 56 by 56, and you can have fairly decent math. You can figure all that stuff out, and you can figure out what the smallest angular size of the object you can see is. All of this will be equal to an angle in radians. Okay. But what that means, is physically in terms of what you're looking at, it means that if you are an astronomer looking at distant stars, what that really means is that you have two stars that are basically barely touching each other, right? Okay. So calculation of this angle basically gives you this. Okay. Where they're barely touching each other, but you can clearly tell that you're looking at two stars. One of the things you have to understand about stars is that from a standpoint of terrestrial observation, a star is an infinitely small object. While they are enormous, they're so far away. Oh, I see. I don't know how to get the logo out, but what I can do, I can lower this thing. Apparently my logo is blocking the formula. Sorry about that. This should do it, and then from there I'm going to write a little bit lower. Close enough. I'll write a little bit lower in a second. Not that critical. But basically this formula, it's on Wikipedia, it's everywhere. Right, and you can basically figure out, okay, center to center of this star, that's going to be the angular thing you can sort of resolve. Then there was another British astronomer by the name of Dawes, who basically said, his name was Dawes, that stars can be closer than this in order for you to be able to resolve them. And he essentially said that if the stars are almost on top of each other, but not quite, okay, you can still kind of tell that there's two of them. Can you guys see this thing reasonably well? I hope so. Okay, looks like testicles. I do apologize. All the optic sketches are always pornographic in nature. I don't know how it works out that way. So basically, it is. He said, okay. I mean, if the stars are this far apart, I can very, very clearly see them. But if it's like this, I still know there are two stars. And that is essentially what he ended up with. It's called the Dawes limit. And if you go through some optimizations and all sort of stuff, what it will work out to is that essentially this factor goes away, and you essentially have the wavelength divided by the diameter of the objective, and that's basically your diffraction limit, smallest angle that you can see. Okay. So far, so good. And as far as imaging lenses go, looking at infinitely small objects very, very far away, it's a pretty decent rule of thumb. Better than average. Okay. And it generally holds. This is not very much, this is not an empirical calculated formula. This is an approximate solution of something called the Bessel function, which describes the size of the diffracted patterns. So there is actually some math involved. This was actually mostly the guy just eyeballing it, just doing so really, really well. So if we can figure out what the highest resolution of our riflescope is, or spotting scope or binocular, whatever else, basically highest resolution objective lens system, and assuming everything else in the riflescope doesn't screw it up, we can then try to go and correlate what it means for a human eye. So the way a riflescope works, objective lens system does its thing and shows you an object, and then the rest of the optics behind it basically kind of magnify it. So if, for example, my objective lens system is capable of imaging something that is, let's say, 1 arc second, and I have a riflescope with a magnification of 60, it's going to come back out from the back of the riflescope the size of 60 arc seconds, 60 times bigger than what the riflescope is. That's how magnification works. And there is a sort of a comparatively common rule of thumb, which is not always accurate, that a healthy human eye can resolve approximately 1 arc minute. 1 arc minute happens to be 60 arc seconds. Okay. So the implication here, if you do the math for 560 nanometer light and 56 millimeter objective, and you convert it into cycles per radian, which basically, you need 2 features. You can see what's going to, the way it's all going to work out. You will think that 28, 29 power is approximately what you get for the maximum sharpness with the 56 millimeter lens. And that's maximum sharpness of the optics. That's not necessarily the image you see. If you want to do some basic mental method, it's the simplest way to ease up on the arithmetic is this basic rule of thumb. For the Dawes limit, since that is the somewhat more ambitious one, that's the one that gets used for stuff like this the most. The easiest way of saying this is, let me see, now we shouldn't be blocking anything, no. So Dawes limit basically means the angle in arc seconds is approximately equal to 120 divided by the diameter of the lens in millimeters. Okay, if let's say you have a 60 millimeter objective, like there's a Citroen scope with a 60 millimeter objective, and I think there's a Zeiss also. It was the 58, doesn't matter, whatever. If let's say you have a 60 millimeter objective scope, 120 divided by 60 is just 2. That means this objective lens is capable of resolving 2 arc seconds. Okay. And then if you follow this logic, if this is a 30-time magnified rifle scope, this 2 arc second angle comes out of the back of the rifle scope as 60 arc seconds, and that's basically the smallest thing your eye can kind of resolve. Okay. All right, is this all making sense? A little bit, somewhat, not too much. So I'm now going to get to the point why it's perfectly accurate and absolutely irrelevant. Well, not absolutely, but mostly irrelevant. But before I move on, I want to make sure I didn't lose you somewhere in there. With me so far, excellent. All right. So first, there is a mistake in the way people are looking at it, because there's by a factor of 2. The way we see stuff, even if we're talking about infinitely small objects we're looking at, what you need an object, you need some space next to it, some dark space, and another bright object. So one cycle is bright, something bright you're looking at, something dark next to it, that are of the same size. And the way we should be thinking of human vision is that it's 60 arc seconds the size of the object, but 120 arc seconds to 2 minutes of angle, to arc minutes. Arc minute is just minute of angle. That is basically the smallest thing where you're actually resolving something. Seeing something and resolving something are different thing. You can see a spot, but to resolve it, you need something next to it that is contrasty. Okay. So first of all, if you want to talk about resolving power, then it's you should be thinking about human eye resolving a cycle that is 120 arc seconds. So immediately there's a factor of 2 error here. The gentleman on sniper side that I was having this discussion with was saying 29 power for 56 millimeter objective scope. He was, instead of 120, he was using 116, I think. Since all of this is sort of eyeballing stuff, it doesn't matter. 120 makes for easy arithmetic. Well, it should have been double that. It should have been, if he was saying 29, it should be 58. Because to resolve something, you need a cycle of bright and dark. Okay, that's one. Second, the reason why this is irrelevant, we sort of know the best mathematical analysis of this is probably from the camera world. That's a good way of, what's a good way of introducing it? Mr. Link is here. Howdy, sir. I'm going to switch gears for just a moment. I'll get back to this in a second. So, but suffice to say, so we've just concluded that for a 60 millimeter objective, we can support approximately 60-time magnification to get a full cycle. And it's a very, very nice rule of thumb. If you want to talk about diffraction limited objectives, notice that I'm using 60 millimeter objective and I'm getting 60-time magnification. So for proper resolution on point objects, meaning infinitely small, very bright objects like 2 stars far away. A reasonably good rule of thumb is to basically assume 60 millimeter objective means you get optimal roughly edge sharpness, not image resolution, edge sharpness at about 60 power. For 6 millimeter objective lens, it would be 56 power, yada yada. That's the maximum. That's if you're not looking through the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. It's basically theoretically best edge sharpness for your eye resolution, assuming you have a healthy eye and all that sort of jazz. Okay. One of the reasons all of this crap falls apart is, well, actually because of a human eye. The eye matters. That's how you see things. When we look at imaging performance of cameras, I'm going to do this brief detour and then get back to this. We think of a camera as a system, and each system has something called MTF. MTF stands for modulation transfer function. And fundamentally, MTF basically means contrast in and contrast out, right? So when any camera, any rendering system does not render anything perfectly, right? If I have, let's say, a repeating bar pattern that the camera is looking at, and it's looking at something that's perfectly sharp, when it comes out of the camera, the way the camera images, it's going to be very, very slightly smudged because nothing in this world is perfect. If the camera, I think there's a moth that's messing with the bulb over there. Okay, so in a camera basically becomes something of a smoothing function to some degree. But the camera is comprised of several things. So there is the lens, then there is the image sensor, then there is readout electronics, and if somebody is physically looking at the image, there's also a display. And every system, every subsystem introduces its own level of slight degradation. It has its own modulation transfer function. And the overall modulation transfer function, the overall smoothing effect of the entire system, is essentially a product of the MTFs of each individual system. And the two most common ones would be, most prominent ones are the lens and the image sensor itself. So the lens has its certain limiting factor. If it's a perfectly designed lens, it will basically obey something like this, what's called diffraction limit, right? However, then that image goes into image sensor. Image sensor is made out of a bunch of small pixels. And if the diffraction limit is smaller than the pixel pitch of that image sensor, then the performance of the overall system is not limited by the lens. It is limited by the image sensor, because the lens may be creating a very, very small spot, but if you don't have small enough pixels to be able to resolve that, tough shit. You are not seeing images to the performance of the lens. Your image sensor becomes a limiting factor. Okay. When we talk about cameras, we don't only look at the lens, we look at everything. We calculate the MTF of everything. We see how all of this sort of stuff matches together. When we talk about riflescopes, we completely ignore how a human eye and human brain work. And I've been sort of in a little bit of a war campaign here to bring that into the conversation, because it really matters. You can almost approximate all of this as riflescope is sort of a lens that delivers the visual information to your eye, and your eye is the image sensor, your brain is the image processor. Okay. And the job of an optic in front of your eye is not just to give you the sharpest edges, but also to present the information to your eye that your eye and your brain can process and interpret most accurately and most clearly. Okay? And there, magnification to some degree matters, and a variety of other things matter, right? The simplest things that we talk about generally fairly commonly, riflescopes have an exit pupil. If your exit pupil is too small, coming out of a riflescope, you can easily run into an issue where, the riflescope may be delivering a perfect image, but the exit pupil is so small, and your eye pupil is comparatively large, and the mismatch between the two of them provides certain issues. In this case, remember, this dose limit refers to looking at stars. A star is an infinitely small object. When you're looking at stars, your brain does not have a whole lot of visual information to process. However, for terrestrial observation, meaning when you're looking at a target, at a deer, at, I don't know, the neighbor you don't like, I have no idea what you guys look at. Hopefully not the neighbor with a rifle scope mounted in the rifle, but to each his own. When you're doing terrestrial observation, the type of an object you're looking at matters greatly, because your brain will recognize objects and make certain objects it knows look significantly sharper, better, and more clear than otherwise. On top of it, the combination of your brain and your eye does this sort of a super resolving thing where your eye moves around a little bit and grabs a lot of visual information and then overlaps it, does a little bit of something called super resolution, and a bunch of other different things. Modern cell phones also do that to some degree as well. And for that, all else being equal, right, having a larger image in terms of the angular size helps your brain process information. So if, let's say, we have a 60mm objective rifle scope, spotting scope, binocular, whatever, and we get it on 30 power, let's say, and for this optic, 30 power is where you have the sharpest edges. You go above 30 power, the edges are not getting any sharper. You're actually looking a little bit blurry, but the objects look bigger. And at some point, you get to the magnification where these objects you're looking at are now big enough for your brain to recognize and process. All of a sudden, the image will look sharper to you. The edge information, the edge sharpness delivered to your eye is not any sharper, but the final image that is being utilized is sharper because you delivered something that's more comfortable for your visual analysis system, for your visual cortex to process and make sense of. Right, I hope all this rambling makes sense. Okay, Mr. Link is saying let's see, if electrifying the brain can make the portion that processes image more powerful, it would help to make more out of scopes. Electrifying the brain. I'm not sure what you mean by electrifying the brain, but basically, if we had better visual processors, would we be able to make more out of an image that the scope delivers? Possibly, I have no idea. Not only do we not know how to make our visual cortex more powerful, we don't even know how it works. We've kind of figured out some things of what it does, what goes in, what comes out, that kind of stuff. But how it actually processes images, we don't have a very clear idea at all. We're developing all this automated image recognition stuff and stuff like that, basically on its own path. We don't know if our modern AI-equipped cameras, if they're processing images in the same way as our brain does or not. We have no clue. Okay. So what all of that means is that you kind of have to think about what you're looking at. Early optical stuff, a lot of it was developed by astronomers who just wanted to see stars. So a lot of the early laws, limits, applications were developed based on looking at infinitely small things very far away. And terrestrial observation is just not like that. Not at all, not in the slightest. Okay. Now, that does not mean that everybody needs to run out and buy the highest power rifle scope known to man. No, not at all, because there's a bunch of other characteristics. For example, I live in New Mexico. We're getting into the summer. Other than early morning, I'm not going to see conditions where I can use a lot of magnification for a few months because it's going to be hot, mirage everywhere, all sorts of crap. Atmospheric conditions matter. What you're looking at matters, right? How good is the actual rifle scope? Matters tremendously because none of them are perfect. Okay. Mr. Salty Larry. Yeah, my perception is that manufacturers who market to poors attempt to deliver way too many access, too much magnification. Yeah, you're absolutely correct, because magnification is very easy to sell. right? And to get a scope that truly performs really, really well on high magnification, it's going to cost you money. There is a reason I pulled out this Vortex here in my office upstairs, March 5-42. March objective lenses, as close to diffraction limited as I've probably seen on rifle scopes, but although I suspect in all the higher end stuff, they're quite good. But there are other advantages to magnification than just edge sharpness, right? And there are obvious disadvantages to magnification: diminished field of view, smaller exit pupil, atmospheric effects, you name it. There's plenty of them, okay? Oh, that's a good question. Two brains will interpret the same image differently. Yes, no, maybe. We don't know. I have a suspicion that we all see and interpret things slightly differently. Some people very differently, right? We know that people who are colorblind see the world in a very, very different way, and their brains are able to process images in a very different way. We all see color a little bit differently. Color perception is a huge deal for how we interpret and understand the images, right? So it's probably reasonable to assume, but simply because, it's not like we can read into a human brain, record an image, and see, how it came out from two different people. We don't have the ability to do that. So there's no real simple answer to this question. All the data we've seen suggests that we all see things slightly differently. And pattern recognition is a big deal, right? So I've gone hunting with people who are, older than I am. Hell, I'm not getting any younger either. And I know for a fact that my eyesight in principle is better. Well, okay, I wear contacts. My corrected eyesight is better. But they are able to detect deer, elk, moose, whatever, the animal, much earlier than I can and from a longer distance. And it's not because their eyes are better, they're not. It's just that they've been hunting for a long time and their brain is so incredibly good in recognizing that pattern, the shape of that animal, that they can pick it out much more easily and much more quickly and under much worse conditions than I can. Although technically, if we go look at resolution charts, I have better eyes, right? This pattern recognition business, aside from the fact that there are some people are naturally better at it than others, can also be trained to a significant degree, as we learned from all the hunters and all sort of stuff. Okay, Mr. Link. Does limiting exit pupil help with image quality and budget scopes? I overheard that the Arc and SH4 Gen 2 AP5 had limited exit pupil to 10 millimeters at lowest magnification, which caused the eye box really small. So 10 millimeter on low magnification is actually not that small. Generally, keeping the exit pupil large makes good optical quality difficult. Excuse me. Okay, guys, I have to go do something real quick. Can you give me one moment? I'll be back. Just give me like 10 seconds. My apologies. My wife is in Israel, so in between things, I'm also keeping on my kids. The best example of this is probably March 4.5 to 28 by 52 is an exceptionally nice rifle scope. But when Bill, a glassaholic, was looking at it, then when I was looking at it, we kind of noticed that even on low power and low light, the image was a little bit dark, very sharp, but a little bit dark. And when we were talking to March, it turned out that they limited the image, limited the exit pupil size substantially, in their case, primarily to severely cut down on flare. So it does help to stop it down. With virtually all of the different rifle scopes we have on low power, they don't use all of the objective lens, right? That's why, the general rule of objective lens diameter divided by magnification means exit pupil only usually works on higher powers, and lower powers it does not. And that's one of the reasons. With Arcan, a really small eye box is not really a side effect of exit pupil. The exit pupil is large enough, they just don't have a particularly good eyepiece design. I have an SH4 Gen 2 here. It's perfectly reasonable scope for the money, but it's not something I can comfortably recommend because it has lots of features, perfectly nice scope, but it's not the easiest scope to use. And I've seen too many people have quality control issues. Although the one I have here is actually very nice. So otherwise, it's well marketed Me Too scope turret, so good for the money, right? But there is a lot to an eyepiece design, and that's one of the things that gives a scope a really good eye box. And Arcan eyepiece design is not as mature as some others I've seen around. Okay, sorry, not 10mm, it was 7mm, still perfectly reasonable. But there's more to an eye box than just exit pupil diameter. There's fore and aft and a variety of other things. Yeah, Arcan just had some issues with eyepiece design. That's pretty much it. Okay. All right, guys, does all of this make some sort of sense? Not a lot of sense. Minimal sense. Okay. The basic, conclusion from all this resolution talk is that if you take a rifle scope, start looking at stars, then these kind of calculations are very relevant. If you look at terrestrial objects, there's just a lot more to it, and simply because you can't ignore a human eye. Okay. All right. I think with this I can probably. I think that I did the lecture that I planned. At least what I wanted to convey, I think I conveyed. If you have any questions, I'll address whatever you got. And if you don't, then we'll call it good. The floor is yours, guys. Let's see if I missed any questions while I was at it. Okay. And it goes to another platform where I don't see the chat here, so I'm just checking if every once in a while people post something there and then I don't see it. Okay, all right. Okay. Interesting. Mr. Fireprank 6, I have a question about head position and how it affects you. Can you clarify? Oh, there's clarification. Okay. Example 1.1 mount height on AR looking through the top of your eyelid versus more heads up positioning. Well, you shouldn't be looking through the top of your eyelid. You should be looking under it. So that's really individual. There is, however, a general rule of thumb for shooting, and it's not just how well you can see, but a variety of other things, is that you want to build your shooting position so that your neck is comparatively unstressed. If you're doing some weird contortions to get behind the scope, aside from not having a stable position, you're also not going to see terribly well because all this extra fatigue, pushing the eye way out somewhere, etc., is going to make things worse. And if you take a very quick shot, you may not see the difference, but if you've spent some amount of time behind the scope, fatigue is going to be accumulating much faster. But what is comfortable varies a little bit for different people, right? So some just want to be perfectly straight up, others prefer this, etc. It varies. In theory, being basically straight up with a taller mount and everything, with your neck as unstressed as possible, makes more sense if you're shooting standing, right? But the moment you go prone, right, you lean forward. If you're trying to keep your head straight up now, Now that's the stressed position. That's going to cause fatigue for your neck and for your eye, right? So in this position, it may be more advantageous to be, leaning on the stock, and then your eye rolls up a little bit. You're looking just under the top eyelid, right? So the answer basically, it depends, and it also depends on how long you're spending behind the scope and what your overall shooting position is. The best way to think about it probably is your head needs to be as unstressed as possible in terms of how it is positioned with respect to the rest of your body. I think that's pretty critical, and you build everything else around it. Okay. For me personally, standard height mounts on ARs around 1.5 inch seem to work really well, but it really depends on which stock it is and all that sort of stuff. For the old hunting rifles, there has always been a big thing of people trying to mount rifle scopes as low as humanly possible. That was a function of stocks that were designed for iron sights and had a lot of drop. With modern stocks that don't have as much drop, I basically completely ignore how low the scope is to the receiver, and I basically figure out how I'm going to hold the rifle, what's comfortable for me, figure out where my eye is, and mount the scope to accommodate for that. Okay. Okay, here's a follow-up. Curious how much your eye's relative position from center may affect eye fatigue or something. It does affect it, but I think the neck fatigue affects it faster. Because what happens with your eye, you're not always staring through. Your eye can move a little bit, can relax, and you're not ruining your shooting position, right? But if you've built your shooting position, your neck is stressed, you can't easily move your head around. That accumulates very fast. With your eye, you have plenty of opportunities to let it relax and move a little bit, stuff like that. Let's see. Out-to-edge resolution seems to be a topic. It varies substantially from scope to scope. It's commonly at 30-50% less than in the center. With rifle scopes, not all that critical. I'm not that picky in terms of what it is at the edges. I don't like it when it's severely distorted, meaning with straight geometric distortion, when straight lines look wavy, that kind of stuff. That generally annoys me, but to some degree. But if it's a little bit less sharp at the edges, it doesn't matter too much. I mean, the way it usually works with this kind of stuff is that the rest of the field of view is for you to detect things, not so much to inspect them, right? So if you want to take a closer look, you're going to try to position yourself so that whatever you're looking at is closer to the center of the scope. Now, the size of the sweet spot does matter, right? So you want the scope to have a fairly large sweet spot, meaning it's going to be very sharp in the center. You want it to stay quite sharp fairly far out, depending on what kind of reticle you use, how you like shooting, and all that sort of stuff. But it's not uncommon for the edges to have the resolution of maybe 50%, 40%, 60% of what it is in the center. And I'm not hugely concerned. Correct. For the tangent theta 3 to 15 you have, would you prefer to 20 instead if they had one with the same configuration? I found 20x handy when zeroing scopes at 100 yards. 20x minimum for me to spot holes well. Interesting. That's another interesting. Your eye changes as you get older. I have some scopes that I've had for a very long time, and 20 years ago, I could see bullet holes at 100 yards very comfortably at 9-10 power. And now I need 12 to 15, right? So my scope didn't change, at least not that much. My eyes did. As far as my personal preference for the tangent, in my case, probably not. Simply because I use tangent as a crossover scope that I do use for both hunting and precision and stuff like that. And from a standpoint of precision shooting, I very seldom go to higher magnification unless I'm spotting or looking at conditions and all that. However, I do like having on hunting scopes, I do like the low magnification to go fairly far down, partly because it gets me a field of view, especially for terrains where the shot may be closer, and also because if I want to put a thermal in front of it, low magnification really helps. So 3 to 15 works well for me. If it was a 2.5 to 12.5 with the same optical quality, I wouldn't say no either. 4 to 20 is not a bad configuration. 4 to 20 is where there's a lot of competition, though. There are good options over there. Already, I don't know if it would necessarily make a ton of sense for Tangent to go there, but it depends. The basic thing is that if I want a scope for precision shooting where I don't need to worry about weight, I have a 5 to 25 Tangent. But for crossover design where weight matters and all that, for me, low magnification is a little bit more important than high magnification. For example, for high magnification, arguably my favorite crossover scope is a Vortex Razor HDL HT 4.5 to 22 by 50. And my only complaint with that scope is that I could have used a little bit less magnification, lower end 20. I don't really care about 22 too much. If they made that scope as like a 3 to 15 or 2.5 to 13 or something like that, it would work better with clip-ons. But on the other hand, I know sheep hunters like a little more magnification. They don't care about clip-ons. So, it really is personal preference to a significant degree. Mr. Northwest Gun is here. Oh, and he's trying to join me on the stream. I did not realize he was coming. Derek, are you ready to go? He's ready to go. I'm going to add him on, and I'm going to plug in my
Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything. Okay, Derek?
Can you hear me?
I can, but not through my headset for some reason.
Oh, well, that sucks.
Do you guys hear echo when he's talking? Anyone? Is there Derek? Keep talking. I'll try to figure this out in the meantime.
Okay, so guys, my name is Derek from Northwest Guns. I do a lot of long-range precision shooting, and I shoot for the precision. I also shoot with the Precision Rifle series. Going to be hopping into NRL Hunter 1 this year. If you guys can see in the back, this is my
Awesome.
NRL Hunter 1 rig.
Mm-hmm.
Chambered in Ilios' favorite caliber of 308. So that's the reason why I put that gun up there today.
Yes, look, I keep on wanting to do an NRL Hunter, and if I do it, I'm going to do it with my 308.
So this company, S2 Delta, is actually out of New Mexico.
The company that makes that rifle?
No, they make the chassis. I designed the rifle. What are you talking about?
I've tried to get you to make me a rifle for a long time.
Well, we'll
brush me off. So
we're getting. Well, it's going to be on a pristine action because it's only. But no, I'm actually going to try to do the NRL Hunter 1 match here in Arizona over in July. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be the rifle that I'm using. It's chambered in 308 right now. We'll see if I keep it at that. See if I can get a better view for you guys.
Okay, just don't touch it or YouTube is going to kill us.
Right. So 20-inch barrel. Rifle comes in at 11.9 pounds with a bipod, 11 pounds without it, or 11.2. All metal, no carbon fiber barrel. That was kind of my goal this year, was to design this, and I was at SHOT Show thinking about every possible way I could design a hunter rifle without using a carbon fiber barrel.
Very nice.
I did it.
Well, my designated NRL Hunter rifle, and probably not this year, hopefully next year I'll be able to do it. This year for me is already a shit show. I'm getting on a plane again on Saturday. I calculated between April 1st and May 31st, I will be on 20 planes. It's ridiculous. But I'm making 12 pounds with a suppressor, just say. But it is a carbon fiber barrel also. All right, I had a couple
I'm
questions.
just not a fan of them.
Yeah, I can't beat the price. I have a couple of questions I want to address, and then we'll see what else comes up. So Rick goes basically cheek weld position to center of optic. We were talking about how to, get your head situated, where the optic needs to be mounted. Correct. Figure out where it is comfortable for you to hold the gun, and adjust the optic height over the receiver to that, not the other way around.
Okay. No, I can understand. I was catching the last end of your conversation
you got
there.
it. Okay.
So, so each one of my rifles is set up just a touch different. This one is running a one-piece mount system. All my other ones are running scope rings. I figured with this one, I might change this out to a scope rings and a different scope. I haven't decided on what's going to be the final plan for the scope, but right now it's making weight. I got a Hawk Optic 4 to 16 by 50 on there right now.
So when is the competition?
July 1st.
July 1st. In Arizona?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna come watch, but no. July and August in Arizona is not my favorite part of the year.
It's northern Arizona, not southern.
Okay, a little higher up. Okay, not too bad.
So it's just south of Flagstaff. It's about 2.5 hours away from me.
Just south of Flagstaff. That's
Yeah,
actually a pretty part of the country. We'll see. Well, we will think of going camping with the kids that time, but we'll see.
Oh.
All right. So there were no echoes. So I figured out how to get Derek into the eyepiece. So there shouldn't be any echo, at least not from me. Okay, there's one more question. Let's see. Kind of going back to the objective size from earlier. Although there are limitations with conventional scopes, are we more likely to see huge 60+ millimeter objectives for thermal scopes or clip-ons? Yes and no. First of all, I'm not sure what are the limitations with conventional scopes other than mounting height. And with thermal scopes, there are actually bigger limitations because larger diameter thermal optics start getting exponentially more expensive. It's actually easier to make a large conventional optic with lenses for day optics than for thermal. They obviously exist, but prices start getting quite astronomical for the high quality ones. So
I haven't gotten into playing with thermals yet, just because of the price.
That's okay. We'll get you into that. No, thermals are a lot of fun, but once again, it's easy for me to say that's sort of what I do for a living.
Right.
But all of the optical resolution stuff that we talked about, I don't know did you catch my whole diatribe in the morning, earlier, when I was talking about resolution limits, and all sort of stuff?
No, I was eating dinner with the family.
Oh. Now I feel like you love your family more than me.
First time we've all been together in a week, so.
Yeah. No, I'm just a little sore about that. So between me traveling and my wife traveling, I calculated that during the month of May, my wife and I will be within 1,000 miles of each other for less than 50 hours.
Wow.
So if I sound a little bit irritable, you know why? I'm getting on a plane again on Saturday. If you hear of an incident on a plane heading to Scotland, don't be terribly surprised. I might throw somebody out the window. I'm just getting a little irritable here. So in a nutshell, as I discussed earlier, the resolution limit of an optic basically depends on the wavelength of light coming in. For the type of stuff we see, it's basically color. Red is longer wavelength, blue is shorter wavelength. We usually base this on green, which is around 550, 560 nanometers. For thermals, the wavelength of light we're looking at is much, much longer. For thermal clip-ons, the uncooled stuff that we typically work with, the central wavelength of the region they're looking at is about 10 microns. What that means is that the diffraction limit is directly proportional to the wavelength. That means that same diameter optic in a long-wave thermal band, okay, is going to have approximately 20, if it's perfectly optimized, right, will have 20 times worse angular resolution, than a day optic of the same diameter that's also perfectly optimized. Okay, if that makes sense too. So from this pure standpoint of pure performance, that actually makes more sense to start bumping up the lens diameters for thermal optics. But as I said, it starts getting prohibitively expensive. On the other hand, as we get to higher resolution, smaller pixel pitch, etc., thermal designs like that iRay TS75, which is a high definition HD image sensor, it has a 75 millimeter lens and costs $18,000. Part of the cost, obviously not everything of the cost, but part of the cost is that that large lens is A, expensive, B, it's harder to get the whole thing optimized when it's large. Okay. Interesting. So that's a question for you. What are the weight limits for that comp? I assume you're talking about NRL Hunter. I'll let Derek cover it. There are two different classes. One is really interesting, and another one is just for people to game each other.
Okay, so NRL Hunter and NRL Hunter 1 are the rules are somewhat same, but with NRL Hunter 1, your weight limit is 16 pounds,
There you go.
but there is no weight class for it, technically. You can shoot any caliber you want. You don't have to make power factor with it. But for NRL Hunter, there's production division, light class, heavy class. So this year they introduced you're allowed to shoot a 243 in production division, light class no more than 12 pounds, and heavy division no more than 16 pounds. So either way I go, I got a rifle that will do it, and that's why I was trying to stick with the light class because it's a little more competitive from what I've seen. Everybody wants to shoot light class, but if it dodges into the 12.1, then I'm fine. I'll shoot heavy. I don't care. Now, the thing is that this year they're not taking the factor in that slings are not part of your weight factor this year, which is really nice because it is a safety device for you to carry a rifle. So you can have whatever sling you want. I'm going to use a QD mounted sling system for this one. And I got a full review of the chassis, and I'm working on the video right now for the rifle for you guys on my channel. So this is going to be my first Hunter match. I'm going to eat crow because I was not one for the NRL Hunter series, but I'm going to give it a shot. I've had fun with shooting the actual PRS series this year, so we're going to have to see how it goes.
So I promised that the first NRL Hunter match that I shoot will be done with the Mosin Nagant. Technically, I could, my NRL, the rifle that's actually set up for NRL Hunter right now is the Fix in 308. That's set up with the Burris XTR Pro and all that. And with that scope, I'm making 12 pounds, right?
Oh, yeah. Easily.
But I promised that if I ever shoot a match, I'm going to do it with a Mosin Nagant and a tangent taser. So I have one of my competition-style Mosin Nagants. I have a few of the 2876 Mosin Nagants set up with a tangent taser 3 to 15 by 50. But I will not make 12 pounds with it, but the way I shoot, I don't think it makes any difference.
Right. Well,
that's going to be a lot of fun to shoot.
I was going to say, this year for PRS, I've been shooting the 3 to 18 Element Titan, and I love that scope. I
have that scope. It's actually a very, very nice scope. Okay.
I've been really enjoying actually going to a lower power scope this year than actually jumping into a higher power scope like I know some people
have. To each his own. I've done this only one type thing many times, and if I only had one general purpose scope, rifle scope to use for everything, it would be a tangent 3 to 15 by 50. Because I really don't shoot on very high magnification all that much. On rimfire I do, right? On centerfire rifles, not that much. But anyhow, I have that tangent right now is mounted on the Mosin Nagant, and once I hopefully get control of my schedule, I'm gonna go shoot a match with that, just to be the first one. All right, a couple of quick questions. All right, the gentleman who was asking about riflescope damages. I meant more limitations of practical effects than in actual construction. With day scopes, honestly, I would actually like to see somebody do some larger objectives because, in low light and that kind of stuff, they do make a difference. But it doesn't seem like there is all that much demand for it, so probably not terribly likely. And proliferation of thermals makes low light requirements on conventional scopes kind of moot. It doesn't matter how large a conventional scope is. If you can hunt at night, pop a thermal on it, and no conventional optic can compare. So, and there is one more. Oh, that's actually an interesting question. Is the practical small limit to exit pupil always more bigger is better? There is no real practical limit per se. But once it gets very, very small, you need the ultra steady shooting position and very good lighting conditions. So the exit pupil basically needs to be matched roughly to your eye pupil for optimal performance. For any sort of field use, you really don't want the exit pupil rifle scope to be much smaller than your eye pupil. That's pretty much it. But bigger is better. It's not an independent thing. To have a large exit pupil, you then need to go to lower magnification, larger objectives. So everything comes with a cost. You want the exit pupil to be large enough for comfortable shooting. With a very small exit pupil, eye fatigue is going to set in fast, stuff like that. So outside of bench rest, F class, that kind of stuff, nobody really does too much with ultra high magnification rifle scopes, partly because that very, very small exit pupil dictates very specific shooting positions, lighting conditions, that kind of stuff. Like the conversation Derek and I were just having, that he was really enjoying the lower magnification rifle scopes. But one of the reasons is that it's just comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You set it on, I don't know what you shoot at, let's say 10 power with a 50 millimeter objective. 5 millimeter exit pupil under any sort of a normal lighting condition is just a very comfortable way to go. And if you're not shooting at things that are ultra small and you have a high quality optic, you can shoot them pretty far away. It's pretty comfortable to aim. It's easier to hold the rifle through recoil and not completely lose sight of your target. If you missed, it's much easier to see where you miss went, so you can do shot correction. There are many advantages to not going for the highest magnification and the smallest exit pupil. Where the real balance is very hard to say, right? For example, this scope that generally sits on my precision rimfire is this is a Razor Gen 3, 6-36. It's a really, really nice scope. But when I'm sighting in, I want to shoot something very small, I crank up the magnification. It's awesome. It's a great scope. I start shooting positional stuff off of a barricade, something like that, and I don't really look at the magnification. I just adjust it to something that's comfortable. I keep on finding myself 10, 12 power again. That's just where I seem to be comfortable. And I think nice, large, forgiving exit pupil is probably a big part of that.
Well, I found for being the lower magnification scope this year, with most of the matches where I'm at now, we're not shooting past 1,000 yards, really. Mm-hmm. So it's easier for me to scan and pick up the target and then just adjust my power down to where I want it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which is pretty much about 8 to 10 on normal.
Right, yeah. Look, the joy of FFP scopes, right? So I've switched to almost everything being front focal plane a very long time ago. Mm-hmm. Everybody was yelling at me back then. Night Force NXS, second focal plane, was the shit, and all the Night Force groupies, basically declared a fatwa on me and all that sort of stuff. It still holds to the best of my knowledge. I occasionally still get interesting commentary on that. I switched to front focal plane very early on because I like to do wind calls with the reticle. Mm-hmm. And when the reticle's in the second focal plane, I have to be always aware what magnification I'm on. That means I have to move my head. That means I lose my shooting position. It was driving me bananas. I just switched to front focal plane. And then unless I specifically look at it afterwards, I have no idea what magnification I'm shooting on. When I have a rough idea, I kind of know how big the reticle is. But I pay no attention to it. Right? If I'm trying to find a target, I start on low power, just like what Derek was saying, kind of find what you're supposed to shoot at, get into, adjust your position if you need to, and then adjust magnification to whatever is comfortable and just go for it. And half the time I don't know what magnification I'm on. Right. Sounds familiar?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really the way to do it. So. Okay. Have you seen the new Zeiss S3 scopes, Derek?
I tried getting over to the Zeiss booth over at SHOT Show, and that thing was packed. I could not get over to see them this year.
Yeah, I had a nice conversation with a guy who runs Zeiss's marketing. I think his name's Kyle, and we had a couple of conversations after SHOT. He was supposed to send me the 4-25, but it never materialized, and I was so busy I kind of moved on. I need to ping him again and see. I saw them at SHOT. They seem like good scopes. But beyond that, I don't have anything to say. They kind of live in an interesting place. They're competing against, they're a little bit less expensive, but they're going against the same world where there is a Razor Gen 3, Burris XTR Pro, the new Element Theos, which is a very nice scope,
Mm-hmm.
Zeiss has 3s in there. It's a tough field. I think Zeiss is competitive, but how they really stack up, I honestly couldn't tell you. I have the Burris XTR Pro here and the Razer Gen 3, and I'm looking at them side by side. And I think within there, the Razer is a little more expensive. And I think within their price ranges, they're both very, 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 very tough to beat. So it's going to be, I need to get the Zeiss here. I need to get the Element Theos here and look at it side by side. I think of this new crop of 6 to 36 scopes. From what I've seen so far, I think the Razer Gen 3 has the best optics. I think the Element Theos has the best turrets. Zeiss is quite good in both of those regards, but without extensive time side by side, it's just so hard to tell.
So at SHOT Show, I took the new Element Theos. I took it outside, and I played around with the new eye system that they had for the sunshade. I'm just about sold on that scope myself. I love the reticle. The glass was clear. I was counting chains at a mile on a crane with it, and it was. I want to say I would put it up against a 5 to 25 by 56 Night Force ATACR and a head-to-head.
Yeah, it's generally in that range. So optically, the Razer Gen 3 is better than the ATACR. It was designed to beat it, right? So that's how it works. I had that Theos here for about 3 weeks before SHOT Show. Then they needed it back, so I returned it back to them, and I'm going to at some later point, I'm going to do a thorough test. So I had it next to the Razer Gen 3. Optically, it's close, but Razer is a little bit better. But Theos is very, very good.
I really like the turrets on the Theos, too.
The turrets are really excellent. So let's see what else we have. Oh, any thoughts on the new Citron 40mm tube?
Nope.
Do you have any thoughts on 40mm tubes, Derek?
Not going there tonight with that one.
No.
There's only one scope I've ever seen with a 40mm tube, and I'm not mentioning them.
No, yeah, IR, yeah. So IR did it because they can't machine things. Their micro machining is not very good, so they need that real estate to do something useful. And then they assume that Americans think bigger is better, and they just market it that way. Citron wanted a lot of magnification. They wanted lots of adjustment, which actually had that scope here for quite a few months, and I liked it overall. The basic problem with that Citron is that when they released it, they wanted $3,000 for it. And for $3,000, you can do a lot of other stuff. And for example, that same Razer Gen 3 is a better scope for $3,000. Then they discounted it, and you could pick it up for $2,100, $2,200, and then it's actually a nice scope because optically it's very good. It tracks well, and if you ever run out of ammo, you just take it off of your rifle, grab it by the eyepiece, and you can club baby seals 2 at a time. That thing's massive.
Do the same with the 1911. I mean,
yeah, I think as a blunt instrument, I think my money is in the Citron. But the basic problem that Citron always has is that I don't think anybody at Citron has ever shot a gun. Well, I'm sure they've shot a gun, but they don't understand precision shooting. So they have 2 reticles. One is this kind of a tree-type reticle, which is a little bit silly. And then the other reticle, they have the simple mil hash, and that one is okay. So if you find it for a couple of grand and you need lots of magnification with a mil hash reticle, it's actually a nice scope. Optically, mechanically, there's nothing wrong with it. I think they just overpriced it and they didn't pay attention to reticles like they always do. Right. Citron does have new S6 scopes coming out. I think there is some sort of an improved reticle, and that one is going to be a 5 to 30 by 56. But I haven't seen a production model yet, so it's it's very hard to say.
Yeah, it looks like Citron's back up to $2,900 on their scope according to their website.
Well, I don't know what the street price is, but basically, yeah, the S8 is a nice scope, but for $3,000, you can do better, basically.
I'd probably rather have a Leopold Mark V.
Optically, it was better than Mark V, but a lot heavier.
Okay.
Look, if you're spending $3,000 on a scope, buy a Razor Gen 3. I've seen nothing for $3,000 that's better, basically.
Right. No, I have nothing against the Gen 3 Razor. I think they're a great scope, but if I'm going to put a scope of that magnitude, it's going to be on my ELR light class rifle, and where ounces equals pounds real quick.
Okay.
You got
I'll
26
let you
pounds
talk
to
for a
play
minute. I have to do something. Give me 1 second.
Okay. So, okay. So I've been dabbling with optics for the last couple of years. I've learned a lot here from Ilya, from being friends with him over the last couple of years. My main scopes I've been shooting lately have been a lot of the Element Titans. I got that, and I got the Sidewinder Hawk right there. I've had that one for a little over a year now. Not a bad scope. Not fond of the reticle as much as I thought I would be, especially on a bolt gun. I'm going to give it a try on a gas gun. Let me show you guys my other rifle I have. So the one I have down here that's set up on the Bipod XT, that is my 243 Ackley Improved set up with a 5-25 by 56 Titan. Big shout out to Element for sending that scope out for me for the Night Force ELR Steel Challenge. And then over there is the 300 PRC that I built a few years back. That's going to be my backup rifle for my match. So I have a lot of experience with different calibers, everything from small to, I want to say get bigger bore. Let's say 338 is where I pretty much am stopping right now until the things with primers and brass right now, especially with 375 Shy-Tac brass is a little hard to find. But I'm going to be doing a whole thing, guys, on Wildcats on my channel. I mainly shoot the 243 AI this year for PRS. Phenomenal cartridge, and ballistically, I can't say enough about this thing and how well it's actually shooting.
So is NRL Hunter allowing 243 now? Because I don't think it made the power factor last year.
For production class only.
Okay, so Ackley Improved then cannot be production class, right?
No, but
Has to be
with
regular.
but for NRL Hunter 1, you can shoot any caliber you want because there's no power factor.
Oh, okay.
Just your rifle can't go over 16 pounds. I honestly thought about doing a 20-inch barreled 243 AI for this rifle next year.
Interesting.
Just because it's such a shoot straight and rifle.
Yeah, very interesting. I have a 243 semi-auto with a barrel that weighs like 9 pounds. It's one of those Draco's barrels.
Mm-hmm.
I built one a long time ago just for shits and giggles. Haven't shot it in a bit. I need to pull it out and shoot it.
You really should. 243 is fun to shoot.
Yeah, I bought that barrel on a severe discount, and I didn't look at the twist rate. It's 1-9 twist rate, so I can't shoot fun bullets in it.
That's actually not a bad twist rate for a 243.
It's basically a varminter, essentially. It's very accurate,
right?
But it's a varminter. Okay. Anyhow, I apologize. My wife kept on calling me, and since she's on Israel, I figured I need to pick up and figure out, make sure everything's okay. I've got an interesting question here. The new Mark V 2-10 by 30 has made me wonder with a 30mm objective. At what point does sight focus become irrelevant because you have so much depth of field that you never end up touching it anyways? It kind of depends what you do with the scope. I could try to put Derek on the spot here. I'd probably enjoy watching him squirm, but I'll let him off the hook this one time. So when all of the long-range guys, when we talk about sight focus, we tend to think about longer distances, right? It's one of the reasons scopes like Tangent Data and others do so well, is that they have this incredibly forgiving depth of field. With the Tangent, I put the parallax somewhere in a 300-ish, 200-ish, whatever range, and I never have to change it out to infinity, right? Some other scopes have a little bit more depth of field with low power variables. For example, all the new 1 to 10s and stuff, they start running out of depth of field at about 700-800 yards. And if you want to shoot further, side focus actually helps. Like, that's one of the reasons March has it. Some others are coming out with it as well. For my Razor Gen 3 1 to 10, for example, I actually went to Vortex Factory. I had them set the parallax for me at 300 yards because it was more important for me to not have to worry about what happens at longer distances. And that's essentially hyperfocal distance for that scope. What that means then is that if I want to be on 10 power and I'm trying to shoot at 60 yards, it's going to be blurry. So at closer ranges, I need to dial the magnification down to increase the depth of field. And that's sort of where side focus for compact scopes becomes more important, not a long distance, short distance. If you are trying to use 10 power at close distance, where you need to make a very, very accurate shot, in our situations, if you're law enforcement, whatever else, where you may need that, that's where side focus becomes more critical. For shooting up close, it makes more difference than for shooting far away on small objective scopes. I haven't tested the 2 to 10 by 30 yet. I plan to once they release the new reticle, so probably toward the end of the summer. But it has a lot of depth of field and side focus, so it's going to be great for dry practice indoors, for occasionally trying to shoot a left testicle of a mosquito at 11 yards, that kind of stuff. At longer distances, you probably won't need to mess with it too much. It's all going to be in focus. Like with the scopes that Derek has been talking about, the Hawk and the Element 3 to 18, the depth of field is very good, but that's one of the comparatively few things where there's still a significant difference between something like that and something like a Tangent, for example, right? So you have to, with a less expensive scope, as excellent as these things are, you do have to work the side focus a bit more than you do with some of the higher-end stuff. So it's, but once you get past the sweet spot, any small improvement in performance is exponentially higher price. You just kind of have to figure out how much money you're willing to spend. Okay, Mr. GTM has the Zeiss S3 425, and it's great. Yeah, so that core 425 design, 2 other manufacturers about to come out with scopes based on that core design from Light Optics Works. It's going to be very interesting to see if there's anything different about the Zeiss, or if it's all the same OEM design that they're all working with. That's maybe a good question for Mr. Derek. Is there any place for the 7 to 35 Mark V on the market now?
I know of a couple people that use the 7 to 35 for field matches. Do I think there's a place for it? Yes. I know a couple guys that are shooting ELR that use it. I'm a fan of the Mark Vs. I like the 5 to 25 by 56 more than I do the 7 to 35, just because I get just a touch more elevation inside of it. And I like the glass a little more. I like the depth of field. Now, the 7 to 35 does have its place. It's just depending on who's running it and what you're running it for, in my opinion. But to me, the 5 to 25 by 56 is a great all-around for PRS, field matches, ELR. So there is a place for it. It just depends if you want to spend that little extra money or not.
That's a good answer. Look, the big advantage of Mark V series over most other similar configured scopes is that they're lighter. For applications where you want this style scope and the weight matches, Mark V is easily one of the better choices. And for some situations, it helps to have a little bit more field of view in the low end. Then you go with 5 to 25. For other situations, we don't care too much about that. But you may occasionally need a little bit more magnification high end for wind, rim, for whatever. Do 7 to 35. So is there a place for it? Yeah. So. Okay. All right, I think that's a question for you as well. 243 only, or 6GT, 6 Creedmoor can do it too.
So for NRL Hunter 1, you can run any caliber. I was actually going to run a 6GT barreled action on this chassis, but I decided against it because I was sitting at about 15 pounds. I really didn't want the weight factor. So that's why I went and did the 308 back here, the barrel, because I had it sitting in the corner anyways. And I really wanted to do it on a pristine action. So nothing against the action company that I had the 6GT on, but at the same time, I have a plethora of 308 brass, so it's really not. It's more cost effective for me to run a 308 than it would be the 6GT. Yes, I think the 243 would do a phenomenal job in NRL Hunter 1 because the 243 is just an apparently an accurate cartridge. But if I had my way about it, I would probably go 243 Ackley improved, just because I'm an oddball guy like that. But all in all, you can run anything you want for NRL Hunter 1, anything from 6mm. I think you can even run a 22 Creedmoor. So, I mean, I'm interested to see who's running what when I get up there. Because honestly, for me, I kind of wanted to run with a traditional hunting caliber because it is a hunting style match.
Correct.
And the 308, I'm good out to 800, 900 yards. If I need to do holdovers, I got plenty in the reticle to do holdovers. So in most NRL Hunter matches or Hunter 1 matches, don't go out to past 1,000 yards anyways.
Okay. Good answer. I'm with you. To me, any competition that happens, people immediately start gaming it. And you know what? More power to them, to each his own. If I do an NRL Hunter competition, it's going to be with a rifle I'm actually willing to hunt with.
I think your
while
key
you
would
can
be a great
obviously,
one.
people do hunt with a 243. I live out west. Well, technically, I do have a pronghorn tag, but I'm probably not going to do it with a 243. So, have you ever rechambered 280 Remington into 280 Ackley?
No, I haven't. I actually want to do a 280 Ackley. That's one of my long action cartridges I want to do along with a 25-06 Ackley.
So I have a 280 Remington Tika. I was thinking of it's a very, very accurate barrel. I was thinking of doing just rechambering in 280 Ackley. It's kind of would be an interesting cartridge for me, because 280 Remington is I like to use factory ammo when I can, and there's actually more 280 Ackley ammo than 280. So,
right.
It's kind of interesting.
And on a side note, the 280 Ackley improved is the only Sammy spec cartridge.
Of all the Ackley improved ones, yeah. 280 Ackley for me has a great advantage in that Hornady still makes ammo for it, so they'll send me a couple of boxes here and there.
So does a Nozzler.
Yeah, so does Nozzler. Yeah, but Nozzler won't send them to me. Hornady will.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Chan. The Attacker 7-35 is the most popular scope for the PRS game for a long time. I assume it's not for its great mag range. Is that scope calibrated well on the magnification PRS people use? 7-35 is a very good general purpose magnification for PRS type shooting, because almost nobody ever goes below 8-9, and a lot of people shoot a little bit higher up. For that game, there is no real disadvantage to a 7-35, but you also have to keep in mind, so Night Force has very good shooter support programs, I think let's call it that. And also with Night Force Attacker, 7-35 is a better scope than a 5-25. Night Force always claims that's not the case, that they're the same, but all the ones I've looked at, 7-35 was actually a better scope. It's a nice scope. So for quite a long time, 7-35 Attacker was kind of very nice combination of price, performance, etc. Then they jacked up the prices. So now you're pretty close to Z-Comp. Now there is a Razor Gen 3. There's nothing wrong with the Attacker 7-35, but it's not really top of the hill anymore or close to it. So I don't know. Do you have any mileage with it, Derek?
No. Well, we sell them where I work. I played around with it in the store, but no, I've actually never really gotten behind the 7-35 Attacker.
It's a very, very nice scope, and the Mil XT reticle is really nicely done for PRS. A lot of people really like it. So there's nothing wrong with that scope, but I mean, the whole Attacker line is kind of due for upgrade revamping for Gen 2, something like that. It's been around for a while. The competition is now better.
I can't disagree with you on that one.
And continuation of the 2 to 10 discussion. So it basically turns into more of a focus switch between close range and medium long. Didn't think about law enforcement scenario. Sort of, not so much a focus switch. A lower magnification, you will end at closer distances, you will end up playing with the side focus a good bit. But yeah, it becomes more critical at closer distances than longer ones. All right. And there we go. Mr. Chen goes, 2020 Waypoint carbon fiber with Razor Gen 2 4.5 to 27 would be my game. If that's the stick you're willing to log uphill with you when chasing elk, absolutely, that's the one.
The Waypoint is actually a nice rifle. It's not very heavy, and I was actually really impressed with it.
Waypoint is a Springfield, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm somewhat biased against Springfield, but everybody tells me I should look at the Waypoint.
It's not a bad rifle. It really isn't. For the price point for what you're getting on it, you really can't touch a custom rifle for that price point at like $2,200, $2,300. Especially with the carbon fiber barrel.
You just can't take it home.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
Interesting. How much the Waypoint is? A couple of grand?
Right.
Is it short action only, or do they do longer action as well?
I think they got a short action and kind of like a modified medium action because they're running a 6.5 PRC in it. Or a 308.
7 or 6.5?
6.5.
Yeah, well, 6.5 you can do in a short action, maybe a little more length, not by much.
Just depending on what bullets you plan on using in it, because you can't use the 156s in it and still mag feed it.
Yeah, I pulled up the Waypoint page just to see what calibers they offered, and in a typical Springfield tradition, to find any useful information, you have to spend 6 hours on it. Yeah, so 308, 6 grid more, 6.5 grid more, 6.5 PRC. 6.5 PRC would actually be an interesting choice. I've been wanting to get a rifle in 6.5 PRC, partially because I have that pronghorn hunt in October, partially because I always want a new rifle. But in practical terms, every time I look into my safe, then the other safe, then the other one, and I realize I need another rifle, and like I need a hole in my head. And whatever money I have should be spent on suppressors. So.
I can say the same thing, but bring them on.
Okay, Mr. Link. It's because Springfield only made the action. Trigger tech trigger, AG composite stock, BSF barrel. So not really Springfield. That's why it's good. Okay. It's not a bad idea. Okay. Think I'm running out of power. Let me go get my power adapter. The field is yours. You can talk about Waypoint. We'll be right back.
Okay. So I got a little bit of time with the Waypoint, guys. We sell them where I work. We had the 6.5 PRC and we have the 308. The 6.5 PRC has a longer barrel. If I was going to use it for a dedicated like backpacking gun, I'd probably go 308. Not because I'm a 308 fanboy or anything, just because of practicality and size and keeping the weight down and whatever. And also with the Waypoint, they also make a steel barrel. So with that one, it's really hard to decide where I'd want to go. I'm not a big carbon fiber barrel guy, but at the same time, I'd be willing to give that rifle a fair chance because the Waypoint really is at a good selling point because of what you're getting with it. I think if I remember right, it's got a Trigger Tech special. It could have the Trigger Tech primary in it. I would probably change the trigger out. That's if I couldn't get it down to where I was comfortable because I'm not much of a Trigger Tech guy.
I don't
Unfortunately,
know Trigger Techs.
Unfortunately, I got a Trigger Tech Diamond single stage in this one. That was a gift from my wife a couple of years ago. But I mainly run Elfman Tactical triggers, which is just a very underrated 700 triggers, and I use all their stuff in my PRS rifles. So I'm kind of biased when it comes to my triggers.
You said a curse word. You said 700.
Okay, 700 style of action, not an actual 700.
Fine.
And if you want to talk about the new 700 rifles, I will
gladly trash those all day long for you.
Are there new ones? They start making them again?
Yeah, they started making them. In my opinion, they're junk. They're not worth the money you pay for them.
Well, to be fair, they haven't. So I've been messing with guns for the better part of the last 30 years. And at that time, I've never seen a Remington rifle worth buying, basically.
You know, we bought my wife a 1974 Remington 700 and a 270 Winchester. And I will honestly say that 700 just shoots lights out.
Well, it's from 1974, right? That rifle is older than I am.
But that rifle is a really good rifle. I do shoot 700 style cloned actions. That's what the Pristine Technologies is back there. I really like that platform, especially for competition, because you can get any select style of trigger you want for it. So it kind of outbeats a thing going to Savage or something like that.
People keep on trying to convince me to build a custom rifle using a 700 clone action, and I just can't bring myself to do it. I don't know.
When we meet up one of these days, I'll bring out the Pristine so you can check it.
Oh, no. I've shot a lot of them. They're wonderful. It's just that the moment somebody 700 anything, I get slightly nauseous.
I'm sorry, it's not a Q. I mean,
No, there are plenty of nice rifles out there. The Remington thing is. Q is lagging behind. They were supposed to make the mega fix so that I could have a 6.5 PRC fix. But I don't know. I need to decide if I want to pick something else up or wait for Q. And once again, I'm not really liking rifle. So what I'm probably going to do for pronghorn, I have that old Tikka before the T3s, Tikka 695 and 280 Remington. I bought for $500 many years ago. And it was stupid accurate, so I put it in a really nice stock. And it's still stupid accurate despite me doing some work on it.
Right.
So now I'm thinking if I can find somebody to thread the muzzle for me, and so I can put a suppressor, maybe I'll hunt with that. So, there's a question we got here. Opinion on Trigicon 10 mile 4.5 to 30 by 56. Have you had any mileage with these?
I have not seen that one at all.
So it's a perfectly reasonable scope. There is this generation of scopes from Light Optics Works that are all generally related to each other. Trigicon 10 mile 4.5 to 30, Delta Striker 4.5 to 30, Athlon Kronos 4.5 to 29, Tracked Toric 4.5 to 30, and there are probably a couple more out there. I don't remember right now. They're all related designs. They're not all identical, but they're all related. And they're all pretty good scopes, optical and mechanical. Of this batch, I don't think 10 mile is the best one. It's just a stock design, essentially, from LOW with 2 illumination colors. But it's perfectly respectable. And it just comes out, if you like the reticle, you can find a good deal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good scope. I think these are still running in a 1700, 1800 range. The basic problem is that usually you can find a slightly better deal on something like a Tracked Toric, which I slightly prefer. They did the turrets a little bit different, etc. I think it's slightly better. If you look around, the best deal of these you can probably find on Athlon Kronos Gen 2. You fairly regularly see them around $1,200-$1,300 on different sales and stuff like that. So Trigicon ends up kind of being in no man's land. It's a perfectly reasonable scope and all that, but it's not the best of this family, although not the worst, and it's not the best bang for the buck. And you can kind of go, okay, so what do I do with it? But if you find a good deal, you like the reticle, pick it up. It's a nice scope.
Well, I will say with the Athlon Kronos Gen 2, my buddy Trent just hit a 2 mile target with this 33XC about a week and a half ago at the Sandy K4 match up in Kansas.
Just to be clear, he shot at it, right? He didn't just walk over and hit it. It's a
yes, he shot it.
Okay, just making sure. Look, this generation of scopes from Light Optics Works is very good, and arguably if you do want to do long-range precision, one of these is the best for the body if you're doing Japanese scopes. Going higher than that's where the sweet spot is. Going higher in price with that will get you a better scope, but now you kind of have to think about what did it really get you, right? The kind of big challenge to them right now is probably Burris XTR3i. It's coming out of the Philippines, and it's really going to have the 3.3 to 18 model here. But the 5.5 to 30 is very competitive, and it's less expensive than these Japanese scopes. This Philippine manufacturers really stepped up. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But this generation of Japanese scopes, they've been around for some number of years now. They're just robust. They're good optically. They track. And really nice scope family. Mr. Hemby, you should look at the Sequence Havoc Heat rifle setup. I've looked at it briefly. They actually looked very, very good. I remember not liking the price too much, but liking the weight. You have any experience with them?
No, I don't.
I remember they were more expensive than the Springfield. I think they were in the $3,000 to $4,000 range, right? I'm gonna look it up.
I don't know. Now you got me wondering.
Sequence Hit. I remember they were very well made guns. No, they're a couple of grand. They're like the Waypoint. I know Glenn Seekins a little bit. It would be very hard to. Oh, wow.
Actually, there's a YouTube channel. Another guy I follow on YouTube. He's got this rifle in 6GT. I think it's Rob's Reloading. He's been doing a lot of stuff with it lately.
Okay, so they have a hunting style rifle. That's out stock for about $1,900, and 6.5 PRC is one of the options, and short and long actions. Oh yeah, now I remember what I didn't like it. Yeah, it's nice, lightweight, 7 pounds, but they're running fairly long barrels, and I want to do everything with suppressor these days. So I would probably, if I were building myself a rifle, even with one of these comparatively oval bore calibers, I probably wouldn't go longer than 20 inches.
See, what kills me is they did a 1-in-8 twist on the 6GT and on the 6 Creedmoor. Really need at least a 7.5 minimum, in my opinion, on those two calibers to really get the most out of it.
See, if I was getting one of those, I'd probably do 6.5 PRC, and their 1-in-8 is a good twist.
Right, for that's perfect.
But then once again, it's a 24-inch barrel. I don't want to buy a $2,000 rifle just so that I could chop off 4 inches of the barrel, the next day.
Fair enough.
From a standpoint of handling, right now, so my 308 is a 24-inch barrel. That's a 308 fix. And then I'm adding another 6.5 inches or so of suppressor on it. So I'm lugging around a 30-inch barrel. It's still very light, but it gets a little bit unwieldy. I'm okay if I'm adding up altogether to around 26 with a suppressor.
Gotcha.
So eventually I'm going to end up basically doing something custom. Or, nice thing about the fix, I can just swap barrels out and all that. So we'll see. But yeah, Seekins makes nice stuff. All right, somebody has just ordered Tech Ops from Mike. I keep on hearing Tech Ops mentioned, but I don't know who Mike is. Isn't that guy from LA, Tech Ops Rifles? Something like that.
Yeah, I think they're in Beverly Hills.
Oh yeah, I know that one is. I don't have any personal experience with them. I think when I lived in LA, one guy had it. I shot it. It seemed like a nice gun. I thought it was a little overpriced. But it's been a decade since I thought about Tech Ops, now that I think about it. And back then, I remember wondering, okay, this just another 700 a clone. What's so special about this? Because in the modern market, honestly, if I want this kind of a custom rifle, I don't need to order a rifle from anyone. I can go get, I don't know, Curtis Action, get a pre-fit barrel, spin the barrel on, go get a stock from, pick one, I don't know. If it's not a chassis, if it's conventional stock.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm looking at the
Yes,
TAC
okay.
Ops Tango series.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a 700 blueprinted
Just like
action.
Acura 700, right? But the
On
catch
a
is that
Macmillan
on Acura
stock.
700, you really don't need a gunsmith because we have pre-fit barrels, very, very highly precise actions. If triggers, everything fits. As long as you know how to glass bed a stock, you're fine. If you're doing a chassis, you might not even need to do that.
My whole thing is, if you're going to do something off of a basic 700 action, you're better off just saving the money and just jumping over and getting a custom action, because you're going to have it blueprinted. You're going to have the Seiko
Correct.
extractor done. You're going to have the bushing done on the firing pin. And all that adds up after a while. And then the external bolt release. It really is. You're just better off going to a custom action at that point instead of messing around with a 700 cut.
Correct, but all of that you
basic.
can more or less do yourself with a lot of actions right now. You really don't need to do much.
But I built a rifle just like this one for Pristine, and this is the rifle that started SHOT Show off this year. So, to me, this really is just a basic 700 tactical operations rifle.
The Pristine is how much is one of these actions?
So a Pristine is about $12.99. If you guys want to have a discount code, I'll help take $100 off with the discount code.
So $1,200. Okay.
So
barrel. How much is a barrel?
You can get a good Savage pre-fit barrel for between $350 and $450.
Okay, let's say $400, $1,200, $400, $1,600 bucks.
$35 for a barrel nut.
Trigger.
About $200 for a good trigger, depending on who you go
Okay,
with.
so we are at $1,800. Stock. Nice Macmillan stock will cost you a little bit, but.
So you get a Macmillan MC3 stock for about $400. It's just as good as the A5 the TAC Ops style you're showing here.
And the only things we're missing are bottom metal and muzzle device.
Well, see, the bottom metal you can get from MC3. It comes with the stock.
It comes with it, okay. So just the muzzle device. I don't do muzzle brakes, so for me it's a lot simpler.
Right. I do muzzle brakes because I'm not shooting suppressed right now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, my favorite chassis to run is the XRS MDT.
Mm-hmm.
So, by far, that is probably one of the best bang for the bucks you're going to find.
Yeah. For a hunting rifle, I'd probably do like a Macmillan Game Warden stock, more likely than a chassis. I have my fixes, which look kind of like chassis guns, and I'm really, really comfortable with them.
Right.
The very ultralight chassis is usually comparatively expensive or comparatively heavy. So, I mean, I would love the MDT carbon fiber everything chassis on the hunting gun, but I don't know if I want to pay that much.
That's why I went with this chassis out of New Mexico.
All right, you'll need to tell me more about it. I had no idea there is a chassis in New Mexico other than my safe.
Yep. Called S2 Delta.
S2 Delta?
Yep.
You know where in New Mexico they are?
Oh, you had to ask. I don't know. I just know
I'll look them up.
I was actually talking
to S2Delta.com. They make chassis. To Marines, found it. Contact, mailing list. No others. I have no idea where they're located. I'll figure it out.
So I'm looking at something that Link posted about the Aero Precision action. I have my opinions with the Aero Precision action. After seeing it at SHOT Show and knowing a couple people that have them, I have my doubts with that one. Mac Brothers does make a good action, but you are waiting about 14 to 22 weeks right now is last time.
I'm trying to find the comment you're referring to.
It is.
There's this whole big thing on bipods. We'll get to that in a moment.
It came in at 9:18, so just a couple minutes ago. I just saw it. I'll go back to the bipod one here before you fire.
Okay. We'll just go on. I'll go pull up the last one that we missed and just go there. We're talking about tech ops. Okay, there we go. So real quick, I'll address this one real fast.
Okay.
If price is the same and weight reticle not an issue, what about Razor Gen 3 versus the Chronos Striker, etc.? They're same generation scopes from Light Optics Works, broadly similar quality. Razor Gen 3 has an advantage with field of view. That's why it's a little more expensive. Outside of that, they're very comparable. Okay. Rick's saying, so switch barrel. So is sequence, I think he's talking about the sequence. Didn't realize it was a switch barrel, but either way, I want to buy a 26-inch barrel just to start switching it out.
Right.
Comment on your twist rate. David Tubb won multinational championships, 1-8, twist 6XC.
Right. 6XC is a whole different beast when it comes down between the GT or the 6 Creedmoor. With the 6 GT, I've been running a 1-7 twist. I know a couple guys running 7.5. So I knew one guy that had an 8 twist in a 6 GT. He was having a little bit of issues with it, but there's nothing wrong with the 1-8. I guess I just personally been running a 1-7 ever since I talked to George Gardner over at GA Precisions, because he was the deciding factor for me to go to that cartridge. I plan on building a 6XC down the road. Just
so is
because
XC a larger case than a GT, or they're about the same size?
It's a little bit larger case than the GT. So the nice thing about the 6XC is you can get it in a small primer pocket or large primer pocket. And at the time, David Tubb was the only one that had dies for it, where George Gardner had RCBS and Hornady and all that stuff. So I went with the 6 GT because the dies were a little bit cheaper. Have no regrets. I think the 6 GT is a phenomenal cartridge. I think the 6XC is a great cartridge too. I met David Tubbs last year and hung out with him at the King of 1 Mile. That's where I met him. Really cool guy. Hung out with him at his shop for a little bit. Met his family. Great gentleman.
I'm very friendly with David Tubb. So if I was doing one of those, I'd be doing XC just because I like David a lot. David is a quirky dude.
He is, but he's so cool though.
He's very nice. He's very, but I like quirky people, and David knows his shit.
Oh, he does. He really
throughout
does.
his whole career on the ballistics and stuff like that, he was always a few years ahead of the competition. Right. So,
if anybody has a chance, go look at any of the XC cartridges that David Tubb has designed. I think you've got a really good design cartridge. I shoot the 33XC, which is my cartridge I sit on the world rankings with right now. So I love it. Have nothing bad to say about it.
Next time you see David, say hi. He's a really good dude. 6.5 PRC is indeed very attractive. There's ammo manufacturers with 156 grain, going a bit over 3,000 foot per second. Yeah, so the reason I'm interested in 6.5 PRC is that I want to build basically kind of like a sheep gun for sheep, pronghorn, that kind of stuff. So the only sheep I ever shot was shot with a 308, and it worked just fine. But it doesn't mean I don't want something else, because there's always a gun out there that I don't yet have, and it's for me right now. It's 6.5 PRC, and it's just burning a hole in my just burning a hole in my heart. I really want one, but I'm trying to contain myself because I'm not exactly liking. Trying to exercise self-restraint, which is something I'm not very good at. So here's a bipod question. So what bipods are you running for NRL? I got fed up with Harris and got an Atlas with an annex lever. I'm not big on Harris. I am not all very big on Atlas, although I do have a couple of Atlas bipods, one of them with a lever from Annex. That makes it a lot better to me. It's perfectly reasonable. Most people, I think, I'm running Sky bipods.
Sky, I run Accutech, the SR5 and the new FD4 this year. And on
for a heavier gun, I actually have a bipod from GRS. This Norwegian company makes stocks. They have a bipod that can be attached, below the handguard or above. Attached above on top of the handguard. You have one back there? Okay. Yep. It is stupid sturdy. For me, it's attached to a rifle, so I don't want to pull it up.
No, it's not. It's just sitting on a stock. It's just a project for the future that we're doing. It's a 300 PRC project. So
It's very, very steady. So there's a new bipod coming out from Revit / G7 / Gunworks. I really loved it at shot. It's more of a hunting style bipod, but I might end up running that if I would do NRL Hunter. We'll see. I'm hoping to see it this summer. They're coming out with it fairly soon. Absolutely one of the more clever bipods I've seen in a while. I'm going to use it for the pronghorn hunt, and if it works well, we'll see. But so my buddy Will, who's a pretty good PRS shooter, he uses Sky bipods, and he thinks they're the best for that game.
I eventually want to get a Sky. I haven't pulled the trigger on one yet because I really like Accutech's design and their construction.
Here you go. Triple pull Sky pod if funding is enough. Yes,
They
are
not bad
exactly
bipods
cheap.
for $1,000.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So here's about tech ops. Tactical operations. Micro tech ops is on snipers hide tiny groups with factory ammo. I've seen 3-shot test targets at 0.008 inches. Okay. I'm sure he builds a nice gun.
I've shot attack ops in the past. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not a nice rifle, but for what you're paying for, it's a stock 700 trigger that's tuned, a Macmillan Tango stock. Oh, it's called the Tango, but it's a Macmillan varminter stock with the sniper fill. I mean, it's not a bad rifle, and I have nothing bad to say about Tac Ops. I think that they do what they do very well. But for me, if I'm going to go that route, I'm just going to go to a custom action.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And 3-shot group of any size is not of anecdotal data. The best group I ever shot was 0.76 of an inch, but it was a 20-shot group. So 3-shot groups are not statistically significant.
I was going to say my 243 AI does with the 105s. I'm shooting 0.3 with Burger bullets, Lapua brass, and Vetivari powder. So that's my winning combination.
How many shots in the group?
5-shot.
5-shot. So even that's statistically not really significant. My first real precision rifle was the first generation Desert Tech. I had 2 barrels for it. One of them was 6.5 by 47 Lapua, or Lapua, as Mr. Slav Guns would correct me. And once I got the load development that done, it was 130 grain Burger bullet, and I got a load where it was consistently shooting sub-MOA 20-shot groups without sitting there letting the barrel cool down, not rushing it, but not waiting for anything either. So that is actually statistically significant. 3-shot groups, I don't know. But once again, I don't doubt attack ops are nice guns. I just, I'm picky and I want more for my money, basically. Back to bipods. The biggest reason I went with an Atlas was I found the panning to be useful, shooting out of a window, and lighter, cheaper than MDT. Yes, panning is generally useful. There is no question about that. And honestly, for the money, Atlas does offer quite a lot because there is nicer stuff out there, but the price starts kind of going up exponentially. One of the bipods I keep on meaning to explore a little bit more, once again, has something to do with David Chubb. He did this asymmetric bipod with someone. And from a physics standpoint, it actually makes a lot of sense. So
it does. And, looking at it, it's really weird looking. But when you actually see it functioned in real life at a match, it makes a lot more sense. Like you said, it just...
Correct. So I was actually thinking, let's say this, if I decide to do an NRL thing with my Mosin Nagant, this Mosin Nagant has an Arca rail on the bottom. I might get that asymmetric bipod and do it with that.
Why don't you just buy a Top Gun?
I would, and he would even give me a discount and all that. But you see, if I have a Top Gun and this and that and all that, when I place distant last in a competition, I have no excuse. But if I'm shooting a Mosin, nobody cares where I placed, right? No, all jokes aside, Top Gun's amazing. I want one. It's expensive. I can't really justify the cost. And as far as I like playing with different guns and all that, but as far as accuracy goes, the gun is not my limiting factor. I have plenty of accurate guns. It's not the gun, it's me. I'm not that good a shot. So if I gonna have extra 5-6 grand to spend, I'm gonna spend it on taking classes. So
Go see Chase Shroud.
who?
Chase Shroud. He's over in Texas.
I
He
don't know
owns
who that is.
Pump Precision.
Is he good?
Oh, very good. Very nice guy too.
All right. Maybe I'll do that. I'm in Texas all the time. All right. Interesting. Hera stock made in Germany. I'm familiar with the company. They make some really shitty AR-15 stocks. Is their bolt gun stock better?
I have no clue.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a German company. They do some AR-15 kind of thumbhole style stocks. Really weird ass design. Really weird ass. So I'm not a big fan. But it's AR-15 stuff. It's a lot cheaper. So maybe on the higher end they do better. For the AR-15 stuff, I am, to put it mildly, not a fan.
Interesting. A little different for sure.
No, it's German.
Okay, so I've seen their AR-15 stocks. I've just never seen their bolt gun stuff.
Okay, so there are a couple of comments here on the new MDT Oryx chassis. They're changing something. Okay, so it's going to be light. Rick goes. But David Tubb thinks outside the box. Yes, he does.
Yes, he does. I'm going to agree with you on that.
Yeah, and he's right more often than not, which is pretty remarkable. But I don't know if you guys can see me. I started making these mugs that I like. I don't know if you can read this. Yeah. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. Okay.
I was going to say, I got this one that a friend sent me a couple of years ago that I keep on my computer.
Yeah. I actually don't have any of those anymore. They're all broke. Between my kids and cleaning ladies, I need to make another batch. I'll send. If next time I make a batch of these, I'll send it to you. So the saying is from Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman, for those who don't know, was a very, very famous physicist. He was a Nobel Prize winner. He was a professor at Caltech, and I did my undergrad at Caltech. He was already gone by the time I got there, so his students were my teachers, that kind of stuff.
This was a coffee mug from my buddy.
Yeah. World's okay, sniper, yeah, I remember. But this saying, I apologize for digression, but that saying is very, very important, right? That science is a belief in the ignorance of experts. The science is data-driven. It's not consensus-driven, right? To go to politics just for a brief moment, every time somebody tells me that 98% of scientists believe in global warming, it's not that I want to necessarily scream, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how science works. Science is data-driven, not consensus-driven. People like to agree with each other. People like to gang up on others. Crowd dynamics are interesting. The fact that a ton of people agree on something, it's an important factor. But unless they are able to prove it with data, and they can't, it means nothing, right? If you want the best possible example of it, look at our reaction to COVID over the last 4 years, right? And all the thought policing, all the screaming about masks and all that sort of stuff. None of that was supported by data. And basically, it was supported by the consensus of experts. It turns out the experts couldn't tell the ass from an elbow. Okay? All the other branches of science and human understanding are fundamentally no different. Data rules, consensus is not critical. That's as simple as that. David Tubb frequently goes against consensus. And the reason why he's usually right when he does is that he's not making a wild-ass guess. David Tubb, out where he's in the middle of nowhere in Texas, a huge piece of land, spends a lot of time shooting and looking at stuff. He really, really has a spectacular understanding of ballistics. David Tubbs' contrarian views come out of data, not out of his imagination. Okay? And it doesn't matter what the experts say, data is data. Okay. Bushnell new Match Pro 5-30. Is it any good? I see it has mechanical rev indicator, auto shut-off elimination, etc. Is mechanical rev indicator a good feature to have now? It used to be only RSMB colors. No, it's been around on quite a few scopes now. Rev indicator is a good thing to have. That scope itself is okay. It's basically a perfectly standard Chinese scope, but nice feature set. Seems like a decent scope. Have you played with it at all?
No, I have not. I'd like to, but
I saw it at shot.
yeah.
Looked like a perfectly reasonable scope. Like, I'm right now at the point where I'm not accepting any new stuff for review until I dig through my backlog. Once I do, it's one of the scopes I'd like to glance at.
Okay, I'll
But
send you
once
my forwarding address.
What?
I'll send you my forwarding address.
Would you like me to provide some commentary on that, or can you fill in the blanks yourself?
Absolutely.
You're good? Okay. Just making sure.
I'm good.
Because I have a vast vocabulary that can explain with great precision what I think of that idea. But speaking of MDT, they showed the MDT field stock with aluminum bedding and polymer body, but it has been like 3 years and nowhere to be found. Yeah, that was their very inexpensive stock. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really followed up on that. Not really sure what was happening with that. It looked perfectly reasonable for not a lot of money, but it's one of those things that I'd like to see a good number of them make it out into the field and see how they hold up before I do too much with it.
I think the Oryx chassis kind of eliminated that one because the Oryx is sitting at like a $429 price point.
Yeah, if it's in the $400 range, then you probably don't need anything less than that. Okay,
Like
Mr. Joel is here. Well, thank you for joining us.
I was going to say, I shoot the XRS myself. I absolutely love that one. I've got one of the new upgrades on mine now. I'm waiting to get the other one when I get back from the Night Force match.
Fireprint goes, wow, Hera is great if you're going for the Starship Troopers look.
I might have to reach out to them because I got some SBR tags coming, so it could be a fun
you should talk to them. But Starship Troopers came out in the 90s when I was in high school, then college,
right?
And I will be honest with you, other than that shower scene, I remember nothing from that movie. Okay.
That doesn't surprise me.
If I have to run around with a Hera stock rifle to get into that shower with those girls and turn off the cameras, maybe. Outside of that kind of motivation, I'm not a huge fan of Hera products.
Well, if your wife doesn't watch the live stream, or you're sleeping on the couch.
Well, she just sent me the request from Israel, so I'm assuming she doesn't. Then again, there are people who know her who do, so they'll probably forward her the link.
You're screwed.
Well, she's coming back on Saturday around noon, and I get in the plane to go to Scotland around 5. So I have a reasonable chance of surviving.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, all jokes aside, like I said, it's... I bought a Hera stock when I was in California because they made a California legal version where the thumb thing is blocked. Because, you couldn't... In California, if you have a pistol grip or you can wrap the thumb around the grip, it apparently makes you an immediate mass murderer. But if you can't, you're perfectly safe.
It makes some sense.
Yeah, it's California. Nothing about that state makes sense.
Yeah, I know. And I'm going to be going there here in a couple months. So.
Why?
We're thinking about taking a trip out to the beach.
Oh, yeah, not moving, just... Okay.
No. Oh, God, no. Okay. God, how dare you swear at me?
So
I wouldn't last a week out there if I had to. Shit.
But anyhow, so I had one, installing. It was kind of interesting. Some of the engineering solutions are just kooky. Then when I moved to New Mexico, the first thing I did was I pulled out the thing that blocks the thumb hole grip and used it the way God intended, and realized that stock sucks. It was not designed for human hands, human bodies, human shoulders, and it's cheap plastic, like gaps everywhere. Like the weird ass gaps that my beard was catching on, all sorts of weird shit. I just took it off, threw it out. Or maybe it's somewhere in the closet. I can check. Okay, so. Question about Apex. Have you had a chance to look at the Apex rival? Honestly, I haven't, and I kind of need to ping them and see.
Mm-hmm. I have.
Have you played with it?
Yeah, I did a video of it over on my channel from Shot
For
Show.
the 4x32?
Yes, actually, I got some more videos I'm launching here in the next couple of weeks. The binodes, the new hunting scope, and one other one that I did.
The bino with the reticle, or which one?
I believe it's the bino with the reticle.
Yeah. So they had the new 3 to 15 by 44 shot and the new bino. I am interested in those, but once again, I need to hold off for a little bit. Then I'll get my hands on them. So we'll see. They are perfectly reasonable. The scopes are perfectly reasonable. Japanese scopes, Japan Optics Limited, decent reticle, good scopes. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with them that I'm aware of. I've seen those designs from other people, but not the 3 to 15. So that's the one I want to look at. That's actually an interesting question. I saw Tika CTR, Varmint, and UPR are back in stock in lots of places. Are they overpriced around 1K?
No. I'm going to say Tika's probably got one of the best actions for a production rifle that's going to get you the closest to a custom action as possible.
Based on how accurate, on average, Tikas have been, I'd say 1K is not bad at all. If you want to get into this, get one, shoot it, eventually upgrade the stock, shoot it some more. Good actions, good barrels. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them.
No, the CTR is actually a really nice rifle with a good stock on it.
Yeah, that is very true. So I think price-wise, they are perfectly reasonable. Okay, we're over 2 hours, so we need to be wrapping up.
Yep, I know.
Some of us have to work for a living once in a while.
Yeah, me too, every day.
Allegedly, yeah. So let's see. We'll take last couple of questions if you guys have anything, and if not, we'll thank Derek for spending some time with us, and wrap up for tonight. So while you guys are thinking about your parting wishes, so it's been a while since the last live stream. I am going to try to be more on top of it. Next week, I'm in Scotland. So I might do something from there if I have reasonable enough internet connection. There is a work conference there that I'm going to spend a couple of days roaming around different distilleries, sampling scotch and pretending I belong there. After I am back, hopefully my absolutely psychotic schedule should slow down a little bit. At least that's my hope. The plan is still to do these every couple of weeks. I am going to start bringing in some people from optics companies. I'm gonna bring over a friend of mine from Vortex. I'm gonna bring John from Tract. They've got new scope coming out, so I want to bring John over to talk about that scope and the company a little bit. I think Tract deserves more attention than they get. So they're good people, good company. There'll be a few others here and there, but hopefully I'll be able to do this a little bit more during the summer. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Derek, for joining us. If you guys have not seen his channel, Northwest Guns, Derek is a man of the world and a man of the modern world. He doesn't actually live in the Northwest, but he self-identifies as a Northwest shooter. That's called a Northwest Guns.
I shouldn't
encourage these delusions, but
I actually don't live too far from him. I do plan on making my way out to meet up with him and do a live.
But to be fair, I am not claiming that I'm in the Northwest.
Right.
I say that I am no longer in California, and that's good enough. On that cheerful note, we're going to wrap up. Thank you all. Thank you for sticking with us. And, that's interesting. Maybe we can find out why Vortex can't make a good red dot. No, they can, actually. We can delve into that when there is more time. Right.
Right.
Thank you all, and good night.